Vaccines. All right. Good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. Today we're going to talk about mitigating anxiety. Today we're going to talk about what the Torah tells us about how we can live a life that is serene, a life that is calm, and it's got everything to do. It's got everything to do with establishing a personal relationship with God. You know, we often tend to think of God as some sort of a optional elective in our lives that we do maybe when I don't have anything better going on. If my golf game, if it's raining, maybe I'll go to synagogue. But in reality, we're supposed to have a deeply personal relationship with God, just like you have with your husband or your wife or your parent or your child. You're supposed to have a relationship with God that is not just transactional, but in fact meaningful, one that is business-like and real. I mean, if you think of God as your client, for example, think of how much attention you put into your client, into making sure that they're happy, remembering their birthdays, and so on and so forth. Imagine that's the kind of relationship that we're supposed to aspire towards in our relationship with God, and the benefits that God promises us in return are sensational, including the mitigation of our anxiety, as we're about to learn in this Torah portion today. Today's Torah portion is one that discusses something that seems to have nothing to do with anxiety, but actually it's profoundly relevant. It's the Torah portion on page 1199 in the blue Kahot Chumash, which speaks about the obligation, or the rights really, the rights of employees. It's the rights of employees whilst working in the field, what they have what they're allowed to eat and what they're not allowed to eat. This is a seemingly business corporate law, right? But in fact, when it comes to God, we know that whatever God does himself is what he commands us to do as well. This is a principle in Jewish spirituality, which is mentioned over and over throughout the Medrash, throughout the Gemara Yerushalmi, where it says that whatever God does himself is what he commands us to do. So if you want to have an insight into the ways of God, then you should look at what he commands us to do and how he relates to us, how he engages with us, because once you realize how God engages with us, that's when you're going to get an insight into how God actually operates, right? So let's take a look at what this mitzvah is on page 1199. It says like this. It's 2 verses. If you've been hired as a harvester and in this capacity you enter your neighbor's vineyard, your boss. During the harvest season, you may eat as many grapes as you desire, but only until you are sated. You may not put any into your container to eat later. So no doggy bags, right? If you're working as a worker and a harvester in your neighbor's vineyard or whoever, somebody or your boss's vineyard, you're allowed to eat on the job. You're allowed to eat as many grapes as you want on the job, but you can't take any home. Similarly, if you've been hired as a harvester and in this capacity, you enter your neighbor's field of standing grain. During the harvest season, you may pick the ears of grain manually in order to eat the kernels. But you may not lift a sickle upon your neighbor's standing grain to cut any of it for yourself. Now, this is interesting. In the vineyard, you're allowed to eat as many grapes as you want. But in the field, you're allowed to pick the ears of grain with your hands, but you cannot lift a sickle. What's the difference? The difference is volume. You're going to take a lot more with a sickle than you're going to be able to take off with your hands. And I want to welcome Daniel from the trucker. We haven't seen you in a while. And Debo from Western Australia. I think you said you're from. Leah, I see you're from New York. We're all together. Wonderful, guys. Worldwide wisdom, right? Okay. So today we're learning about how God treats us. So we learned about the laws between employers and employees. It's interesting. Why do we need both laws? And why are they different? Why is the guy collecting the grapes different to the guy collecting the grain?
The grapes can be eaten right there.
Oh, and the grain can't be eaten right there?
No.
You can't do that?
The grapes are sweeter. You have a better relationship with God.
Ooh, interesting. She says the grapes are sweeter. Good morning, Stacy. This is interesting. Okay, good. So let's take a look. So we got 2 different situations here we learned about. One is in the vineyard and one is in the field of grain. As it happens, the worker in the field is not being paid in grapes or in grain. He's getting his paycheck at the end of the day. as we learn elsewhere in the portion. What this is just there in order to remove from him anxiety. That he shouldn't feel anxious about how delicious the grapes or the grain looks, that he wants to take it to taste some, but he can't because his hands are tied. So the purpose of this mitzvah is to mitigate the anxiety of the employee. This is not his salary. In the same way exactly, in our relationship with God, we are the employees and God is our boss. We are working for God. What are we doing for God? He gave us a contract with 613 missions, and they apply at all times and in all places. There's actually 7 more rabbinical mitzvahs. You know what the 7 rabbinical mitzvahs are? Washing hands before bread, Kiddush and Avdallah, Hanukkah and Purim. That's 5, I think. The laws of mourning, which we learned from this week's Torah portion as well at the very beginning. And I think it's the 7 days of feasting after a wedding. I think those are the seven mitzvahs that are of rabbinical origins. We have 620 commandments. That's a lifetime of work. We are employees of God Almighty. And now, in addition to the fact that God is going to reward us at the end of the contract, remember, we are not W-2 employees of God. We are 1099s. You know the differences?
Yeah.
W-2 is
employee
paid on salary. We are actually contractual workers of God, where he has to pay us at the end of the contract. And that's why when Mashiach comes, that's the culmination of our accumulated efforts. Where it's like when you're building a house, you don't get paid a salary, you get paid as you finish the job, right? It's a contract.
You pay as you go too.
Well, he is paying us as we go. Fine, so you break up the contract, but the lump sum is at the end. So that's what Mashiach is. Mashiach is the balloon payment at the end, which is a world of peace and serenity and consciousness, which is a world that we have built together, right?
Aren't we paid every day?
How are we paid every day?
God's blessings and
Oh, so that's the grapes that we're learning about right now. That's the grapes and the grain. Hang on. The salary we get paid for our efforts, we get paid at the end of the job. But what is it that we get paid on a daily basis while we're in the field? Here God says you're allowed to eat the grapes, then you're allowed to eat the grain because I want to remove from you anxiety while you're doing the work, just like the employee should be able to work ruhig, relaxed, calm, without having to stress out or anything. So too God says, look, I'm going to let you eat along the way. I'm going to take care of your needs along the way, but that's not as part of your salary. That's just part in order to mitigate your anxiety.
What if you a bank?
A bank? What do you mean, what if you're a bank?
And you have a teller there.
I'm not understanding the question. Is that a question?
Can he collect some money?
Hang on. So we're talking about a vineyard and we're talking about a field of grains. I'm not talking about a bank just yet, but let's apply it in the analog. So the Rebbe here explains that there are two different examples. I know you're not happy. You'll tell me in a minute why you're not happy. But
I'm very happy.
Oh, you are happy. Oh, well, you better find out why you should be very happy. Listen to this. It's very, very interesting. So why is there two examples? It's a nice message. Very nice message we learned. Good. So God doesn't only pay us at the end of the job, but he even is thoughtful enough to mitigate our anxiety along the way and to pay our way, to let us, to enjoy the journey, right? So we don't have to worry about how we're going to survive along the way, right? But why do we have two different examples? Why do we have a field of grain and a vineyard? And why are they different? If you're going to tell me that they can eat as much as he wants, like you can eat as much grapes as he wants, so too you can eat as many ears of grain that he wants, fine. But there's a difference. Here you can eat as many grapes as you want. There you can eat grain with your hand, but not with a sickle. What's the difference? There's a difference in quantity. The grapes, you're going to eat much more grapes than you're going to be collecting grain, right? Because grapes, you can eat as much as you want. Just keep on popping the grapes. But the grain is something which you can only pick by your hand. Right? What is he going to do with the grain anyway? Is he going to take it home? What's he going to do with it?
Make bread out of it.
How do you eat grain?
You don't eat grain.
I mean, I guess you could.
Look, the difference is like this. The grapes you're eating along the way, so you can eat all day from 9 to 5.
Right.
But with the grain, you're going to take it home and
But you're not supposed to take it home.
You know, it doesn't say you can't take it home.
Well, that's what you said with the grapes.
I said they're two different examples.
That's all.
How much can you possibly carry home? You can't carry like a truckload home. You know, take a little baggie maybe. You know what I mean? That's it.
You came on a donkey, the donkey.
Yeah. So what's the difference? The Rebbe explains that the difference between a field and a vineyard represents two different emotions. You see, the field produces man's necessity, bread. The vineyard produces man's pleasures, wine. Wine, you could live without wine. It is possible to live without wine, right? But you cannot live without bread.
Why?
Because bread is a staple. It's a staple food.
If you married, you would.
If you only had wine and you had no bread, would you survive?
No, but you can eat other things. I mean, you can survive without eating bread.
But I'm talking in terms of a staple. It's a staple.
Okay,
It's
I
like
agree, it's a staple.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you couldn't live on candies, right? Right? Candies is like a luxury, whatever, maybe a poison, but it's a basic sustenance. Thank you, Matthew. Grapes can make wines intoxication versus substance. Very nice. So Matthew put it like this. He says it's intoxication versus substance. The bread is substantial and the wine is intoxicating. So let's call the grapes luxuries and the bread necessities, right? Because there's, and now we can begin to understand that the Rebbe explains why there's two examples in the Torah, because there's two ways of serving God. We have two relationships with God. We have two modalities of serving God, two kinds of humans, two kinds of Jews, or two energies within yourself in your relationship with God. You can have a relationship with God, which is basic fundamental necessity relationship. I do exactly what I must and no more. That's the bread, the field of grain. And then there's a relationship with God, which is about luxury, which is going above and beyond, overboard, which is going above the call, beyond the call of duty, right? That's represented by the grapes. So you got the field of grain, which represents a basic relationship with God, a foundational relationship with God, which is I do my part, I check in, I check out, I check off my list, and I'm done. I do what's necessary. But when it comes to the grapes, when it comes to the luxuries in this relationship with God, I have a relationship which is not just about what I must do. It's about love. It's about extra. It's about luxury. It's about going over the top. And I do not only what God needs from me, like Torchwood says, but I do more. I do even more than that. I go into once, right? Here the Torah tells us that God is going to treat us the way we treat him. When your relationship with God is very limited, restricted, rigid, based on necessity, bread, field of grain, then what are you going to get? God is going to mitigate your anxiety, but you're going to get less. You can only collect it with your hands. You can't use the sickle. Indeed, you're serving God, and that's a very nice thing. You're doing the right thing, but you're doing it out of necessity, and therefore you will receive what God gives you, but not as abundant as the second option. The second option is when a Jew serves God, or a human being serves God in a way which is not just field of grains, but it's a way of a vineyard. When you're doing it in a way of a vineyard, where you're doing it not only because you must, but because you're doing it out of joy, out of gladness and wholeness of heart, because you love what you're doing. Now God is going to tell you, listen, I'm going to remove from you all anxieties. Now you can eat all day long. It's an all-day buffet. You can enjoy and no restrictions upon you. You know, there's a beautiful story. There's a beautiful story about the Lipskers. The Lipskers founded the Chabad of Bell Harbor in Miami. Bell Harbor in Florida. They built this magnificent Chabad center out there, which is just magnificent. It's they have like 80,000 square feet right now. It's a powerhouse of a Chabad center. It's right there across from the ocean on Collins Avenue in Bell Harbor area, right by the Bell Harbor shops. And Rabbi Lisker is now of blessed memory. He passed away a few months ago. Mm-hmm. But his wife Chani is still alive and well. May she live long and be well. Now, when they were preparing to go to Miami, there's an interview of them on video where they talk about what it was like having the private audience with the Rebbe. And she was anxious about going. You're talking 60s over here, the 1960s. She was very, very anxious. She was an American girl, and I think she wanted to live more of a life of convenience, perhaps, and very worried about going out there and being a rebbitzin and a rabbi in a world that wasn't so generous to shuls. Maybe American Jews were still trying to figure it out for themselves when they were moving out of the tenements, moving out of the Lower East Side. They were moving into the suburbs, and maybe they weren't able to have so much abundance. Look, either way, she was anxious. I don't know exactly all the details, but that's what she says in the video. And in the video, the Rebbe says to them like this. The Rebbe reassures them, and he says, "You're going to do well." I'm paraphrasing. The Rebbe says, I'm going with you. Can you imagine the Rebbe says to them, I'm going with you? Obviously in a spiritual way. In a spiritual way, you're not alone. Don't be afraid. I'm going with you. But then the Rebbe adds something which I found sensational. What did the Rebbe add? He said, but it has to be with joy. So I'm going with you. You're going to be successful, but it must be with joy. Why does it have to be with joy? Why does it have to be with joy? What would happen? What's so terrible about not being joyous? Like the story of one of my members who comes to me, Rabbi, he says, I'm very upset with you. I said, why are you upset with me? He says, because you're always telling us that you have to be joyous, and it's a mitzvah to be joyous. What does it say in the Torah you have to be joyous? And I quoted him a verse here. He didn't like it. I quoted him another verse. He didn't like it. Another directive. Well, he wasn't happy. Yeah. I said, your name has the meaning of the word joy. He said, it doesn't matter, but I don't want to be joyous. I want to be miserable. Some people, they like being miserable. So I said to him, that's okay. You don't have to be happy. You don't have to be happy. You could be miserable if that's what makes you happy. So why is it that the Rebbe said to Mrs. Lipsker and Rabbi Lipsker that it must be with joy? Because here's the Torah is telling us. The Torah is telling us that God treats us measure for measure. When our relationship with God is transactional, then God is transactional with us. When our relationship with God is overboard, over the top, above and beyond, then God is magnanimous with us as well. So if you're the kind of guy that's walking around with a measuring tape trying to figure out exactly what your obligation is, and I'm going to do this and no more, right? Then God is going to be walking around with a measuring tape and trying to figure out exactly what he needs to give you and no more. But if your relationship with God is overflowing, abundant, magnanimous, God Almighty, I love you, I'll do whatever you want. You name it. You got it. I'm going to do my best effort. If you're the kind of person that is working not in the field of grains of necessity, but in the lap of luxury within the vineyard, if you're the kind of person whose relationship with God is luxurious, is intoxicating, is joyous, is filled with pleasure, not just with your obligation. If that's the kind of person you are, then God tells us in the Torah, you're going to eat as much as you want. I'm going to give you zero anxiety. And I can tell you in my personal life, as a Chabad rabbi here in Palm Beach Gardens, it takes guts of steel to be a Chabad rabbi. You could. Think about any American entrepreneur opening any business. It's kind of scary to open a business. I believe that only 5% of businesses stay open at the end of 5 years. And 5% of those who stay open after 5 years are open after maybe 10 or 15 years. So you're a fraction of a fraction if you're still in business 15 years after you started, you're like top of the top, you're the 1%. And that takes a tremendous amount of strength and courage and divine providence and divine intervention and so on and so forth. But I can tell you this, that I can always feel that my state of mind directly impacts extraordinary blessings that fall my way. I know that I'm channeling God's blessings, and I know that this is not happening by itself. And I see that the growth of the community and the engagement of our membership and the encounters with new contacts and so on and new opportunities and so on and so forth. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen in a state of depression. It happens as a result of a relationship with God, where God wants to assist. I want to go with you, the Rebbe said, but it must be with joy. In other words, if you're not in a state of joy, then I can't really help you because you're blocking the blessings. when you're able to retain a state of joy, a mindset of magnanimity, not to walk around and say, oh, it's so difficult being a Jew, but rather to be jumping up and down and say it's so joyous to be a Jew. Don't emphasize the oys when you can emphasize the joys.
Oh, there's a new banner.
Yeah. It's not the oys, it's the joys. That's how we're supposed to live our life. When we live our lives that way, then God reflects us like a mirror. Remember, God is your shadow. Your shadow follows your every move. God is your mirror. God will reflect whatever emotion is within you. And this is what the Zohar tells us. In Parshas Ki Seitzei, the Zohar tells us, a very famous Zohar, that the world above is a reflection of the world below. When you're in a state of depression and sadness, then the blessings come from above, restricted and restrained. When you're in a state of magnanimity and joy, positivity and upbeat, then the blessings are overflowing like an avalanche, like a tsunami of blessings coming from above. It all starts right here within. Many people make the mistake to think that joy is the result of success. It's a huge mistake.
The other way around.
People say that when I'll be successful, that's when I'll be joyous. That's when I'll be happy. I don't have the right to be happy right now, Rabbi, because do you know how many problems I have? Torah teaches us no. Joy is not the result of success. Joy is, in fact, the cause of success. And that's why the Zohar tells us that the word for happiness is the same word as thought in Hebrew. Besimcha means joyous, is the same exact letters as machshava, which means thought. People don't realize that joy is something which you create in your mind, not something that happens to you in your heart. You don't just wake up and realize that you are already in a state of joy. That doesn't happen. I mean, it could happen, but that's not proactive joy. Proactive joy is a choice that you make. It's a decision that you make that today I am going to be happy, notwithstanding the challenges, the struggles, the obstacles, the challenge, the headaches, the kubdreinish that is standing in my way. I am choosing joy. I am in the vineyard. I am not in the field of grains.
That's interesting. I had a business partner in the contact lens company. I was president. He was CEO.
Yeah.
Every day I'd come in, say good morning. And the first thing he would say to me, the problem is.
The problem
every
is.
day was the problem is.
I wasn't asking you a question,
That's right.
I was making a
I was
statement.
saying, good morning.
Yeah.
The problem today.
The problem is some people, they're just waiting for the second shoe to drop, right?
Yes,
So the fulfillment of the soul, friends, the fulfillment of this whole idea will happen with the coming of Mashiach very soon today, God willing. When then our service of God will be complete, it will be perfect, where we will serve God out of joy and out of pleasure, out of an awareness of God's presence everywhere, all around us. Instead of having this broken attachment, this unhealthy attachment with God, we will have a secure attachment with God. We will feel grateful. We will bury the hatchet, and we will be able to serve God with our whole heart. As a result of that, God will then remove from us all of our anxieties and our fears. And then the Torah tells us, the Maimonides tells us, goodness will be abundant then. All luxuries will be as plentiful as the earth, as the grains of sand on the earth. With the coming of Mashiach, may it happen speedily in our days. Leti, shalom. Good morning. I'm an engrafted Jew. I'm not sure what an engrafted Jew is. Sounds good. Okay. Engrafted. Yeah, sounds interesting. A lot of things to think about. The Jews are the most fortunate people in creation because the Torah, as will be demonstrated as the world of the godless, falls apart. Okay. All right. Very good, folks. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. Shalom and be joyous.